Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to all of you. We'll give folks just a few more seconds here to get settled. All right, great. So thank you today for joining us. My name is Ariel Dekovic, and I am the ICLEI's Global Head of Communications and Engagement, but more importantly for you today, joining you as the I see Yunus smiling, constituency focal point for the LGMA. And I'm really happy to be with you today. We've got a wonderful lineup today at our first briefing for the year. Quite a lineup of old and new friends, and yeah, I hope that this will be an exciting first briefing for the year for everyone. So I'm going to go through a little bit of the agenda today, and then we'll do a little bit of scene setting. I think some housekeeping is going to come into the chat for you. We do have captions, automated captions as an option in multiple languages, if that's interesting for you. That is a new feature that we've enabled. So, yes, I'm happy to offer you some welcoming remarks today. Then I'll be joined by Yunus Arikan, the big shoes that I'm filling, the former focal point from 2009 to 2025. Then very happy to be joined by another steering committee member, Amelia Dearman from GCoM. Then we will have a video intervention from Kirby, who is the COP31 president, is on the team of the COP31 president of negotiations from the stakeholder engagement department from Australia. Then we will be joined by Bruna Cerqueira from the COP30 presidency, talking about the action agenda. Then Nathan Cooper, who also joined us this morning, very grateful to have him here talking about some of the interplay with the action agenda and the high-level champions team. We have so many great speakers today. We need 2 slides to get them all. Then I'm very happy that we have Ambassador Costa already on the line, representing, of course, the wonderful continuity between COP30 to COP31. Not only as a great advocate for the LGMA and a great partner with the Brazil's Ministry of Cities, but also this year coming in as representing Brazil as co-chair of CHAMP. So this was an outcome of COP30. Well, I'm sure he'll speak more about this, but wonderful to have him on the line today in this new capacity. Then very happy to be joined by Debra Roberts, who is the coordinating lead author for Chapter 5 of the special report. You're going to hear all about that. Bernhard Barth from UN Habitat will be speaking about their report on the urban content of NDCs and a bit about the urban ministerial. And my colleague Rodrigo Perpetuo from ICLEI South America office will kind of close out the results of our LGMA national coordination group from last year. And then finally, I'll end with some engagement opportunities for you. So I hope you'll stick around till the end of our time to find out about all of those ways that you can engage. So with that, I will just do a couple of quick welcome remarks here. Again, very pleased to be with you. This is our second session of the day. We had a wonderful, very full session this morning. Lots of great comments, really, I think, showing the breadth of the way that the constituency has engaged throughout the years. And I know that we have about half on the line who've actually never been to an LGMA briefing before. So if this is your first time here, welcome. We are so happy to have you with us. And I won't go into the whole history of that. I'm going to leave that a little bit to Yunus to talk about in the next section. But I do want to kind of ground us just for a moment in why we're here today, in what the goals of the constituency are, why we exist. We are one of the 9 observer constituencies to the UNFCCC. The constituencies were founded as a way really to provide a route for accredited observer organizations to relate to the UNFCCC processes, for the UNFCCC Secretariat to be able to engage with this now vast, really, number of observer organizations. And so we kind of provide that extra arm of of consultation of engagement for the Secretariat. And today you're going to hear from a number of voices who are all working within the climate space, the urban climate space. And I wanted to start out with contextualizing the picture that they are going to paint together to kind of a little bit refer to where we got to last year and also to give a bit of a vision of where we may be going, not just within the LGMA constituency, but really within the climate agenda overall. So I'm going to read to you from the letter that the president, COP30 President Andre de Lago sent to parties and observers, summarizing the achievements of COP30. And I think there's a lot here that's really relevant for our constituency as we consider where we've been and where we want to go. So in this letter, he writes, like previous COPs, COP30 achieved diplomatic progress, especially given a difficult geopolitical context. But once again, it fell short of what climate scientists and communities are already experiencing climate impacts that they had hoped for. For 3 decades, political, policy, and business cycles operated under the illusion that the pace of global warming might adjust to that of diplomacy, even as climate change itself continued to outpace our international response. COP30 did reveal, however, something essential. Our climate regime has evolved from a machine into a living system, and living systems do not survive through harmony alone, but through adaptation shaped by tension and feedback. Responding to this evolutionary pressure does not mean abandoning multilateralism. It means allowing it to mature. This is why climate multilateralism should now be upgraded to operate at 2 complementary speeds. It should evolve towards a new 2-tier multilateralism. A first institutional speed should remain anchored in consensus. It ensures legitimacy, universality, legal clarity, and collective direction. A second institutional speed should focus on implementation. It should enable open coalitions and capable actors to mobilize resources, deploy solutions, generate learning at scale without reopening questions of direction already settled by consensus in the first tier. In the second tier, emphasis should shift towards the rapid, large-scale mobilization, diffusion, and deployment of resources, actors, and mechanisms worldwide. These are still highly fragmented. But aligned and coordinated, actors can promote strategic integration, allowing exponential change and cascading efforts across sectors, the so-called positive tipping points. And I say all of these in the context of what we're trying to do as a constituency, because I think his points really reflect actually what we have done as a constituency throughout the years. So really working across these 2 tiers. So what are the goals of the LGMA? We are here to really create a unified global voice for subnational governments in the UNFCCC and broader climate processes. Excuse me. We are not only taking that unified creating that unified voice, but actually doing an integrated advocacy approach as well. So not just with our positions, but also with targeted advocacy, with expert opinions, and with other kind of ways of creating public legitimacy and momentum to achieve our collective goals. We also collaborate very closely with the COP presidency. So this, of course, means not just in the negotiations, but across the action agenda, across other ways of engaging in all of the work of each COP. And then finally, again, in that kind of broader global movement, we are engaging to help shift global narratives, showcasing really how local and subnational governments are leading in this space. So with that, I will turn things over to Yunus Arikan, our pretty amazing former focal point with us for 16 years, leading us for 16 years, ICLEI's Director of Global Advocacy, and still a very important member of the LGMA Steering Committee. So welcome, Yunus.
Thank you, Ariel. Thank you. It's really a great pleasure to meet with all of you. I think this will be one of my best webinars of the LGMA since the inception in 2010 because I had the least to prepare. So thanks that you're taking it over, and I will be speaking the least as well. I think that's also showing how much progress we have made in that sense. First of all, this really wants to is an effort from my side to express my appreciation to all my fellow LGMA partners, friends, colleagues for your support, for your trust and engagement, but also use this opportunity for a brief flashback or reflection on what we have achieved or how these 16 years have resulted with, which is really something already by just saying is remarkable. But I think when you see the first of all the picture, but also the insights, I think this is a worthwhile moment to have this reflection. I want to have this one slide. Probably you are surprised that I don't have too many slides, which is also one of my traditions, but I'm very happy that the whole slides are now coming afterwards. I will just use that one, and definitely I will not go to all the details, but present this like the the tip of the iceberg, which is in fact this is a visualization of the annex of the LGMA COP30 position paper, which lists all our achievements in the UNFCCC processes. And it also goes back to the credit to my dear colleague, Philip Young, who was helping us in the COP30 along with Ambassador Costa as his capacity as an urban special envoy. When he had been working with us, so he had a blog and he made that, we together made this one-stop shop. And I want to just comment on this and then share three of my let's say takeaways from how we achieved these results, and also conclude with my just comment for the future, which I will be still be proud to be part of the LGMA steering committee on behalf of ICLEI together with my alternate members across ICLEI teams. So this picture is, as you have noticed, it's a timeline. It also goes to the COP decisions, the decisions from the COP documents, presidency initiatives, action agenda, efforts, and whereas thematic achievements. In fact, this is really shows that there were some peak moments, there were some ways forward to these peak years, and then immediate follow-up after we achieved major outcomes, namely Paris Agreement and also Glasgow. This shows us, of course, also that these things cannot come up in an overnight. It takes time, and obviously the fact that this starts with 2010 is not just because of the time I started, but also it was a remarkable year because we had already the first phase between 95 to 2007, where we had limited engagement in the UNFCCC process, although we were an advocacy constituency. The things started to change when the local government climate roadmap, which was the first global effort of the constituency for three goals of recognition, engagement, and empowerment of our constituency. The goal was to achieve all these in Copenhagen. If we look back, Copenhagen, out of our control, had resulted in certain results that delayed certain progress, but also it was an important experience for all the climate community to take lessons learned and build on further. So this 2010 and until 2025 now was a process that can also be split into the road towards Paris, where we had achieved our recognition within the preamble agreement of the Paris Agreement, which recognized all levels of government, and then through the Glasgow, Sharm, Dubai, Baku process, which is where we formulated engagement for the first time. We managed this multi-level, the concept of how to bring local and regional governments in the process. And now the next step, of course, is the beyond Belém, which is the empowerment of multi-level and urban. And in that sense, how we can see these achievements or this the results, what was the building blocks. So I come up with three main pillars of our success so far. First of all, we were able to broaden our alliance. In fact, when I started this process, I was not part of the urban community. I'm maybe a climate expert. I noticed that our community of the LGMA were just a handful of networks. And over these years, we really broadened our constituency that are accredited and non-accredited organizations. Officially, we have 60 plus networks. And more importantly, we have so many national and regional associations who are involved in that. And what we did, especially the last year's results, was very, very remarkable. The position that Ariel will remind us again, COP30 position was endorsed by 50 plus networks across the world, be it accredited or non-accredited, representing hundreds of networks of local and regional governments from all 6 continents. In fact, this was a demonstration that it is not just a couple of global experts networks, but really the National Association and their partners were all part of this process. The second was also the same thing, that it was also a clarification for us over these years. So we have brought our leaders at important moments that they have presented their inputs, their guidance to us, and we also worked with our partners in the UN system, the documentation from the ministerial and urban or the documents that we have seen in the UN system also made us clear that the constituency, the leaders, and all the UN system have been all contributing all these achievements. Second, that we never gave up creating and innovating to ensure progress. The fact that the success of global climate regime was a success for us at home. Therefore, we did all our best to support this process. I remember when we are now talking about our Blue Zone pavilions, almost as if given, but it was the first time in 2009 in Copenhagen with the local climate lounge that we were in this space where we said that local governments are here alongside of the nations. Again, when Copenhagen failed and with Mexico and Cancun, we were trying to present the registry, accountability, and then this was linked to the Nazca, one of the two building blocks of the Nazca platform. Again, with the UN Secretary General, when he appointed the first ever special envoy for cities, this was almost the building blocks of the action agenda to bring these voices to the process. The same goes along these years that we had the first thematic day. Again, this became a tradition of all the presidencies. It was back in 2013 where we also created the first Friends of Multi-Level Action Network, which was almost a building block for the CHAMP initiative, which was bringing nations alongside with the LGMA. Similarly, these webinars, we have been hearing that so many different constituency members were benefiting from our webinars or bulletins, and the innovation of bringing urban and ministers and climate ministers along the COP area, which was something that we first asked for 2013, materialized in 2022, or building the cities and regions Talanoa dialogues, which paved the way for multi-level NDCs, and bringing town hall COPs into this process, along with the synergies that there are climate, land, and nature. This shows that we have demonstrated all our commitment that the success is benefiting local action as well. And finally, we did not just limit ourselves to the traditional negotiations. We were instrumental in building a new narrative. When I joined this climate negotiations, I was always hearing the co-benefits of climate, which is health, air quality. But in fact, at the local level, we were aware that acting on nature, food, consumption styles, planning or informality was our main goal, from buildings to mobility, and the result of this was improving our efforts on climate emergency. So we literally have managed to bring the climate community to address root causes of climate emergency, and that is now the beacon of hope when this just transition, that the discussion that we will be building from COP30 onwards in this 1.5 degree goals in a planet that is burning politically and ecologically. So this is something that we should all be proud of. So my closing remark is that the work is still not done. Yes, we have made progress on recognition engagement, but in real life, it's even more harder now to go to formulate how multi-level collaboration and urbanization is clearly the two sides of the same coin. This is the new challenge, and definitely in this new era, it needs new momentum, new leadership, new styles, and new team. That's why I'm so happy that I was part of the transition away to transition to a new governance, and then you will hear more with our steering committee members. That is one thing that I really would hope that our constituency keeps in mind, that these two sides of the same coin is helping each other. The ignorance of one side leads to the failure of both. We cannot afford to discuss urbanization without multi-level, and we cannot afford to discuss about multi-level without the fact that we will have to build new cities with the new resources of the national governments, so that this is the challenge that we have to see, that both helping the transformation of the existing ones, but building the new ones together with all hands on deck. With that, Ariel, I'm so happy that you are now taking this challenge. I'm so happy that LGM is stepping up this new era with the bold and very powerful readiness and eagerness and bold commitments. And I will be continuing to support on behalf of ICLEI as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Yunus. And yes, this will not be the last time we see you in one of these webinars, I'm sure, but thank you for that. And yes, I think you lead me very well into the next section, which is a bit of scene setting for today's briefing. And then we're going to get into some of those governance details that you were referring to. So I'm not going to go into too many details here because we only have a few minutes for this, but I do want to just turn our minds back to Belém. Some of us were there, some of us weren't. But either way, I think that our community achieved something really great at COP30, both within the negotiated outcomes, within indirect benefits and committed. Processes that are coming down the pike with multi-level NDCs and the promise of that with the evolution of CHAMP. And then with all of these incredible moments that were showcasing the bottom-up leadership of subnational subnational and local governments, political statements, and really, I think just kind of creating this recognition, especially also through the support of the presidency of Brazil, really just showing the strength of the constituency. Real on like every day of COP seemed to have something else where the constituency was really able to be strong. So I think that building on that strength and recognizing also that we still want more out of this process. And what are those things that we are looking for? What are those goals that we're moving towards? So we're going to attempt to start answering that, of course, now, and I'll talk a little bit about how we're going to do that. But again, just to recognize at COP30, the joint position, Yunus mentioned this, more than 50 networks endorsing this document, which are, international networks, national networks, kind of networks of affiliation. That really came behind this position. And I think it's very strong that, there are networks involved who aren't necessarily focused on sustainability, who are moved by the work of the LGMA to bring sustainability to their members. And likewise, other more sustainability focused networks who choose to endorse the work that we put forward. So I think the strength of that position really, especially last year with this endorsement across the networks, is really one of the strengths that we're bringing into COP31. A bit of the mapping of who is whom in COP31. So we're going to actually hear from some of the folks who are on the COP30 side. Bruna is here today. But just to, sort of turn towards COP31, and then in the next slide, I'll also talk a little bit about that. So as you, I'm sure, know, we have two different countries that are involved in the leadership of COP31. So that's Turkey as the host and having the presidency, and as well as the high-level climate champion, Samed Girbas, and then Australia, who will be the president of negotiations, led by Chris Bowen. And we'll hear from Australia in a moment. A little bit about this modality. Obviously, this is being worked out at the moment. So, what we know so far is that there is a lot of even though the negotiations are led by Australia and Turkey kind of has both the hosting role and also will be leading on the action agenda, there is actually a lot of kind of overlap, I would say, it seems like, between the two countries. And they also have agreed to work in a consensus manner. So kind of coming up with, consulting with each other and coming up with consensus until or looking for solutions through consensus. The other part of the agreement is really a focus on the Pacific Islands, with pre-COP being held in Fiji and a leaders forum in Tuvalu. And I think Turkey is also very supportive of that focus that Australia wants to bring into this COP. And I think the other point of this will also be that Turkey and Australia are working together on the action agenda, though Turkey is leading on it, but Australia has a strong role as well coming into elements of that, and we may hear more about that later. Okay, so with that, that's just a bit of the scene setting of where we got to, where we're going. I'm now very happy to welcome Amelia Dearman, our colleague from the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, and also a representative on the LGMA Steering Committee, to talk us through a bit about our vision for shared governance as we move into this new era of the constituency. So, Amelia, welcome.
Thanks, Ariel, and hi, everyone. So I'd love to just quickly spend a moment reflecting on how together we've got to this point, and as a first kind of acknowledgement, just to say a huge thank you to Yunus in his tireless efforts as the LGMA focal point. And it was really great to hear that presentation about how we've kind of come to this moment in terms of the policy and hear your reflections. So thank you, Yunus. As Ariel just pointed out, we of course had the shared LGMA position towards COP30, but we've in fact had a shared LGMA position towards the last three COPs with wide cross-constituency engagement to write that, endorse it, and also, of course, critically advocate for it during the COPs. And we've also had working groups that sort of have looked at really deep dive thematic negotiation topics to come up with more substantive positions that we can have really good technical conversations on. And actually, the working groups, last year we had for the first time a national LGMA working group in Brazil to really galvanize national networks and gaps there. So that was another really brilliant piece that happened last year. So together we've had shared advocacy and comm strategies, political engagement at things like COP, but also aligned meetings like the local leaders forum, which happened in Rio just before the COP. And alongside all of this great work, there was also an ongoing consultation with the constituency on what governance could look like going forward to continue to build on all of this fantastic progress. So, a decision to establish a steering committee to sort of more formally support this shared approach will hopefully help us further unlock this shared strategy, shared governance, and a shared voice for the LGMA constituency. So if we go to the next slide, please. The idea is really to try and develop a multi-year advocacy strategy. And the benefit of this is really being able to take that longer term view will allow us to mobilize much more effectively, weather any short-term changes, and be able to react within that much bigger framing for our work. And that's something that I'm really excited about and I think will be a really great addition to the already fantastic work of the constituency. So we'll also look at sort of having this shared governance structure of the steering committee, and we hope that can really reflect a diverse and inclusive constituency, making sure that everyone's really bringing their strengths to the table, and that's more inclusive. Yeah, sorry, that was the next slide on shared governance. And then lastly, really thinking about shared voice. So COP30 was a good step forward in the role that local and subnational governments can play in the COP agenda. And the steering committee really gives us a chance to expand that voice as sort of spokespeople, but also kind of in terms of contributing to the positioning. So I think that's why, as GCoM, as one of the organisations that's represented on this steering committee, we're really looking forward to this shared process going forwards and how we can sort of further support the focal point. But I'll pass back to Ariel now to take us through a bit more detail.
Perfect. Thanks, Amelia. And just a bit more on kind of the approach as well from my perspective. I think, as Amelia said, the strength of these sort of shared approaches, I think can be built on by a really rigorous prioritization. So I want the LGMA, to really understand, what the main goals are that we're driving towards, and that everyone here could really be able to reflect that back into your work, into the work that we're doing together. And I hope that that is something that really comes out of this shared governance approach. I think just for sort of realism is important too, pragmatism in the way that we run this constituency, which is volunteer, is especially we're going to hear more about the working groups in a moment. Those are very important kind of spaces for experts to come together. But we know that these are volunteer kind of roles, and so the goal in this formalization of our shared governance is not to create an undue burden for anyone, but just to kind of solidify kind of the organic work that we have been doing in the past. And then finally, the collective impact approach is really key to my heart. I think that's why I was so excited about kind of the direction that we've seen the LGMA move in the past few years to this really collective, really thinking through, how together we can be stronger rather than working as individual organizations, even if we are working towards the same goals. So to me, that's a really exciting part of the LGMA. You've seen this already, but the steering committee was announced last month. So these 8 international organizations who've been involved in the past few years will be representing the LGMA on the steering committee. And one of their first kind of efforts will be to convene our working groups. And these working groups, as I said, really form the kind of backbone of the thematic expertise that the constituency is depending on to be able to engage in these negotiations, into thematic negotiations broadly, into the negotiations at COP, and supporting us in these year-round engagements that are really demanded by the climate negotiations process. And so it really allows us to kind of expand the footprint of the LGMA through the work of these working groups. Just to give you an idea of where we've worked in the past, these are some of the places where we have had either positions, even working groups formulated. So, these are likely to be some of the areas where we'll see that again as these working groups get convened. I'll talk at the end of the webinar about how you can engage in the consultation about the thematic working, or rather the working groups terms of reference, and then of course how you can actually be involved in the working groups once those are convened. But with that, I think we need to move on to first some of our esteemed speakers. So our next speaker is Aaron Kirby. He's coming to us from DQ, as I've learned is the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water at Australia, who is the COP31 International Climate Negotiations Division, particularly in the Office of Stakeholders and Collaboration. And because it is, I think, 1 a.m. now in Australia, we did record our Aaron's intervention at the first session, the first briefing earlier today, and we'll play that now. So here's Aaron.
Thanks so much, and thank you to you and to the whole constituency for convening this first briefing of 2026. I'm Aaron Kirby, as you said. I'm the branch manager of the Stakeholder and Collaboration branch of Australia's COP31 Task Force, and it's really a pleasure to join you this evening. I'm joining from Ngunnawal country here in Canberra, and I'd like to start off by acknowledging the vital role that local and regional governments play. You're often the first to act, and you're always closest to the communities that experience climate impacts. I want to underline that for us, COP31 is a global challenge. You'll hear that a lot from almost every presidency, that no nation can tackle climate change alone. But that's really demonstrated by the nature of COP31 this year. You have 2 nations, Australia as president of negotiations, and Turkey as the COP president, and an entire region in the Pacific with whom we're partnering closely, playing leadership roles. And so in 2026, as you said, Turkey will physically host the COP and the World Leaders Summit in Antalya, and Australia will serve as the COP31 President of Negotiations. And for us, that means we'll be looking at setting the negotiating agenda, managing that agenda, selecting co-facilitators, preparing draft decisions for parties to consider. Really, the engine room of the negotiating agenda will be an Australian occupation for the next 6 months or so. And so, in addition to that, a pre-COP will also be hosted in the Pacific, and that'll be an opportunity for leaders to see firsthand the impacts of climate change on Pacific nations and to hear Pacific voices and solutions. And that pre-COP with the leaders element will take place in Fiji from the 5th to the 8th of October. And that will include an opportunity for leaders to visit another low-lying Pacific country, Tuvalu, as well. So I'm really glad to be speaking to the LGMA specifically. You know, your briefing theme, I think it's a priorities, partnership and engagement. That's exactly right for us. At COP30, we advanced the recognition of multi-level action and the importance of urbanisation. And it was terrific to see, Yunus, your diagram over time of the progress of the recognition of the importance of these issues, the importance of urbanisation, of multi-level action and collaboration. Many of those practical questions, though, remain. How do we turn that recognition into delivery frameworks, into bankable pipelines, and into finance pathways that empower cities and regions as implementation partners? And it really reflects the early thinking we've heard from parties as well as we look at the key pieces before us in the COP31 space this year, including as we consider, you know, how we start the second global stocktake, how we put the meat on the bones of the just transition mechanism, and how we look at mobilizing investment around the world to achieve the Paris goals. And so for our perspective as president of negotiations, the test for COP31 is really about practical progress. How do we make progress against resilience, emissions reductions, sustainable development delivered in ways that work in real places, in real cities, with real budgets and real people? So in terms of what we are looking to the LGMA for, to be honest, like any presidency in March, we are still a bit in listening mode as we hear priorities from parties and constituencies, and we're paying very close attention this evening. But I think one thing that would be a really no regrets move for this constituency is to continue to help make the case, you know, backed by evidence and examples where you can, that action works best when all relevant levels of government lean in. It's, you know, specific to particular countries, of course. Different countries operate in different ways. But in our experience in Australia, multi-level governance is not an add-on, it's an implementation accelerator. And in many cases, it's a precondition to effective action at all. So for us, it's really useful to see the constituency making effective arguments for that coordinated approach. So how to engage? With the presidencies this year. So we know the LGMA constituency provides a unified global voice for subnational governments in the process, and we want to make engagement with Australia in terms of our role as president of negotiations clear and efficient. And so over 2026, where it is within our responsibilities under the Turkey-Australia partnership modalities, we'll be running regular stakeholder briefings as part of that role. Particularly, obviously, for constituencies in Australia, but we'll also support structured participation through established UN FCCC pathways like submissions, observer engagement, so that your perspectives can help inform the practical outcomes we're hoping to deliver this year. And if you have specific proposals or you want to connect to us or to particular cities or regional networks, we can direct you to the COP31 engagement mailbox for follow-up and coordination, and we'll share those details with Ariel after the call to send around. So, you know, obviously it is no novelty to observe that we live in uncertain times at the moment. But it is the case that we think that this global partnership between Australia, the Pacific nations and Turkey demonstrate a really global commitment to multilateralism and to strong global outcomes for everyone. And we really appreciate how your members show leadership, often well in advance in many cases of national timelines. And I'd encourage you to stay very closely engaged as we move from on the back of COP30's momentum into delivering strong outcomes under COP31. Thank you.
And thanks to Aaron for joining us earlier today. So with that, I will move us on to our next speaker, who's here with us now. So I'm very happy to have with us a longtime friend of the constituency, Bruna Cerqueira from the COP30 Action Agenda. She is the COP30 Presidency Action Agenda Coordinator. Bruna, really happy to have you here with us today to give us a bit more on what you were able to achieve, but more importantly, what you are bringing forward in collaboration with both Turkey and Australia.
Yes, thank you, Ariel. It's so nice to be with all of you, to be with, it does feel like home. I always say this whenever I'm talking to the constituency of subnational governments. It does. And I have said this, I'm so grateful to you. I've learned so much from you throughout these years. And thank you so much for all your collaboration to this space. And Ariel, all of the best of luck in this new role. It is, again, wonderful to be with you today. And I think you covered really well some of the context and what happened at COP30. So I don't want to, do that again. But what I do want to share is maybe 3 reflections that are questions for these communities, right? And I'll be very blunt and direct because this is a group of friends, and I hope that we can be that way between ourselves. We do know that you all, although we come from all a place of absolutely acknowledging the importance of subnational governments. I think that's why we're all here. And I think that's the premise, right? We all want to see this work evolving. We all know how important it is to get to the ground, mayors are the ones who are closest to the people, subnational governments. There's no implementation without subnational governments. There's no particular adaptation, which is a big priority for Brazil. No adaptation if we don't look to the ground and to the territories. And we, as COP30, were always very active in saying that throughout all of the time. But we know that you left Belém frustrated. And you left Belém frustrated because despite us talking about subnationals all of the time, there being so much action, the local leaders summits, a lot of plans to accelerate solutions, a lot of concrete things happening. When it came to the text of the negotiations, there wasn't what you expected to be there. And so maybe my questions to you that are a bit philosophical, but I think this is a good moment as the LGMA constituency is reviewing its process and so on, are threefold. One, Ariel, you started this conversation talking about the 12th letter of Ambassador André Corrêa do Lago and the idea of the 2-tier multilateralism. It is very clear in the process that the process is moving to a new stage. The process is moving to its implementation phase. 10 years after the Paris Agreement, we have negotiated a lot. That doesn't mean that the consensus won't still be important. It is very important. But in this new phase, the action, let's say the implementation, gets to be at the same level of importance as the negotiations. So as the context changes, what is the role of the LGMA in this tier 2 of multilateralism? I think is the question for you to think about in the space of action. That's not only advocacy, but it is also about how do we implement. How does this stand, side by side with the Marrakesh Partnership? Because in the Marrakesh Partnership, it's quite broad. It's all of the same stakeholders. If you look at your steering committee, it's all the same organizations that are in the Marrakesh Partnership. But there's a difference of bringing together the whole of the subnational government's views and what it can do. So that is the first provocation. The second provocation is, does the community actually need a consensus-based decision to advance on anything? Is there anything that you cannot do because there isn't something in text already? Because you have gotten text in the past, right? There is recognition already of the importance. There is the permission, let's say, to act. There is across the work programs, there is the idea of always including subnational governments in dialogues and so on. So I think maybe a reflection about what is it that you actually need a consensus-based decision for, I think would be very nice. And what difference would that actually make in practice for the mayor who's trying to, implement a project on mobility or on adaptation, water, sanitation, and so on. So I think that's the second provocation/question. And the third is, you've talked a lot about over the time coming together, a shared voice, but what has been the impact? Since the LGMA has been created, what has collectively for all subnational governments changed in the mayor's ability to access a loan or the mayor's ability to implement a project? How many miles of public transportation have been implemented? What do we want to keep track of in terms of impact? I think is the third question. What is the impact that you would like to achieve? And maybe to put a couple of milestones, COP31 is talking a lot about resilient cities. That will be one of their main themes, as well as waste. What is the impact that you want to make by COP31? And then our second milestone is, what is the impact that you want to make by the next global stocktake? That you want to go into the next global stocktake saying subnational governments have been able to collectively achieve this. with this that you can give to us, we can achieve Y. So I'm sorry that I'm not bringing, answers, but more questions, but it feels like this is the right time for that. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Bruna. Yes, indeed. Very, very salient questions for us. And I do agree. I think this is the perfect time for them. We are going to hear in a few speakers from Debra Roberts, who's going to be talking about the IPCC Special Report on Cities and Climate Change. I think that touches on a lot of the things that you're saying, really drawing together this vision of what we want to achieve over a sort of multi-year period. I think also we're going to hear also on CHAMP. All of these things interweave. So these are really excellent questions that I think can somewhat maybe be answered also by other speakers that we have today. But yes, thank you. And I think then we'll move on to Nathan Cooper, who is sort of the other side of the action agenda coin with the high level champions team. So welcome, Nathan. Nathan is Director of Policy and Engagement for the Climate Champions. And this is a department that provides political and diplomatic advice to the high level champions and delivers strategic engagement to enhance radical collaboration, which is just the kind of collaboration we want. So thank you, Nathan, and welcome.
Amazing. Thank you, Ariel. It's great to be here again. And we had a really successful session earlier today with kind of our Eastern Hemisphere colleagues. And well, thanks LGMA and ICLEI for convening this, and Yunus as well, you for your leadership over these years, which have been consequential and I think speak for everybody, really meaningful. And as Ariel mentioned, so I'm representing the Climate Champions team, and the role and mission of the Climate Champions team is twofold. So firstly, to really operationalize the vision and the priorities of the Climate High-Level Champions, a role that many of you were instrumental in creating and was established 10 years ago at Paris in recognition of the crucial role of non-party stakeholders, especially cities and subnationals and local governments and municipalities as well. So really bringing the kind of priorities of the Climate High-Level Champions, currently Dan Josper for COP30 and Samed Agirbas for COP31 to life. And the second kind of function of the Climate Champions team is really to provide that operational continuity to ensure that incoming presidencies never have to start from scratch in terms of really building on the momentum, making sure there's continuity and working with the initiatives that are the driving engine of the action agenda. And we heard earlier from Australia, some of you joined the webinar that we just had, where we heard some great kind of proverbial passing on of the baton in terms of the structure that the kind of COP30 presidency launched, and in terms of the new evolved action agenda, and really passing that on to Turkey and beyond. And I think most importantly for this group, the role of the Climate Champions team is really to provide that predictable framework that goes beyond COPs and multi-year to create a stable environment for your planning. And hopefully, I think, provide clarity on the expectations when subnationals, when mayors and governors and state secretaries are asking why we should come to COP. We have a very clear framework, and we can now say that your actions do contribute to the delivery of the Paris Agreement, and more specifically, delivery of the GST as well. And I'd like to just highlight some messaging that we heard from the senior advisor, Neil Kaur, who's a senior advisor from SAMED. So I'll just pass on and relay that the COP31 Climate High-Level Champion is already working with both the COP30 presidency and his peer COP30 High-Level Champion, Dan Josper, to really accelerate the implementation of the climate action agenda. He will have a kind of focus on food loss and food waste, as well as water stewardship and food security as well. But he is very committed to kind of continuing the climate action agenda and the Marrakesh partnerships, new focus on the 6 axes and across the activation groups as well. So I'd just now like to go back to the framing that Ariel, you sketched out, and to the provocations and questions that Bruna asked. And I think this is the question that we want to, and the conversation we want to have with you. How can we, and also as the presidencies and the high-level champions, really best support and empower LGMA and the initiatives to really kind of go from strength to strength from this previous kind of era of recognition and mobilization and engagement to a new era of implementation as well. And let's be clear, cities and subnationals are really the heartbeat of this new implementation era. It's no longer accurate to say that local action is peripheral or a sideshow to national diplomacy, as we may have seen in the past. And that's really true and demonstrated by the Global Climate Action Agenda that was updated in Belém, now with mobilizing dozens of major global subnational networks, many on the line today: ICLEI, C40, GCoM, UNDER2, Regions 4, UN Habitat, FMDV. I can give more examples, but just a good indication of how great foundations we've laid for this new era of implementation, and for subnationals and cities to be at the heart of that. And also want to double click on a very powerful kind of innovation of the action agenda, which is these plans to accelerate solutions. The implementation of the action agenda and the coalitions of the willing that kind of Bruna referred to and COP30 have referred to in this context of two-tiered multilateralism. And three plans to accelerate solutions that really kind of stand out for me, and I think are good use cases in how we mobilize the full power of LGMA to really focus on scaling specific solutions. So the first one is we had great leadership from the Brazilian Ministry of Cities, who I see we'll hear from in a second, as well as UNEP and UN Habitat and ICLEI around a plan on resilient urban infrastructure, which seeks to address the real problem, particularly in the global south, that subnational governments face an urgent demand for infrastructure to withstand climate shocks, yet they are often lacking the finance and capacity to move these projects forwards. So this plan to accelerate solution really focuses on delivering high quality green and grey infrastructure, such as nature-based solutions, micro drainage and resilient urban forestry that is replicable even in small municipalities. The second plan to accelerate solution, which I think has a really core subnational component, is the greening cities to beat the heat, which seeks to address the prediction that by 2050, almost half, or actually over half of the global population will be living in extreme heat if the world breaches 2 degrees of global warming. And the Beat to Heat plan to accelerate solution, which is hosted by the core coalition of UNEP, the Global Calling Pledge, C40 GCoM, UNDER2 and Regions 4, is our roadmap for subnational and sustainable calling as well. It focuses on supporting hundreds of cities with local heat plans and greening plans as well. And the last plan to accelerate solution is that I want to highlight is the No Organic Waste plan, which is led by UNEP's Climate and Clean Air Coalition, as well as Food Banking Network and Global Methane Hub and others as well. And this is designed to turn to support subnationals to turn waste into resources for livelihoods and food security, and thereby preventing food waste and hopefully preventing additional methane kind of emissions as well. So I spent a bit of time kind of giving some of the details here in terms of the specific plans to accelerate solutions. But I do think this is kind of really the conversation and the focus of the action agenda for this year and then going forward as well. And it would be great, and back to kind of Bruna's provocations, would be kind of amazing to talk through how LGMA can really focus on kind of scaling those specific solutions through these coalitions of the willing. And one final point I'd like to make as well is how we move from paper to pavements. I think I heard that from somebody on the group. Really bringing the action agenda to the cities and the regions where the impacts are being had. So we're really focused on leveraging the climate weeks throughout the year. There will be a UNFCCC Climate Week in Korea in just 3 weeks' time, and then later in the year in Baku. And then, of course, we have our other regional and global moments like the World Urban Forum in May, the Zero Waste Forum in June, and then Climate Week NYC, and of course, COP31 as well. So key innovation is not everything needs to happen at COP, and we really do want to leverage these more local and regional convenings to really bring the action agenda to life. So final kind of offer, we would like to work with you and through key initiatives of LGMA to ensure that the foundations that we've built on the action agenda really do translate into real co-benefits for the kind of citizens of the cities and the regions that we're all working with. Back over to you, Ariel. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Nathan. And we do have time for at least one question. I haven't seen any in the chat yet, but maybe I can pose a question then to Bruna, which is Bruna, in kind of this new world of consensus and implementation, living alongside each other in equal importance. What kind of advice maybe do you have for the constituencies to maybe bring back to the Secretariat, to bring into the action agenda, as we consider our place in this, what do you think is sort of the best role for the constituencies to play?
Thank you, Ariel. And that's a very good question. And I'm so glad that Nathan was able to cover some of the substance that I avoided. But thank you, Nathan, for that. So I don't have a ready answer, right? And I think it will vary from constituency to constituency, very likely. But for me, there are those that are across the action agenda. So LGMA is a clear one, bingo is a clear one. Those that gather the coalitions of a specific type of stakeholder that are not in one item of the action agenda, but actually across all of that. And so for us to look, one of the provocations that we have been making, and Nathan quoted a number of plans to accelerate solutions that are relevant for subnationals, but actually there are many more. So how do subnational governments feature across all of the axes of the action agenda? How do we take stock of that on an yearly basis of what we need, not only from the consensus piece of the process, but actually what we can do via these plans to accelerate solutions? If we're talking about, I don't know, one key point of advocacy being direct access to finance, we can ask for that to be in a negotiated text, but we can also work together to actually create the specific mechanisms that will enable from a global fund to a multilateral bank, to a development bank at the national level, to a direct credit line to countries X, Y, and Z on sanitation. So we can be much more specific and we can look at these advancements on the areas where these coalitions are already working. And I think that it would be much stronger coming from LGMA as a whole than from one specific coalition. If you're able to say these are the achievements of the communities of subnational governments in the action agenda this year, and that the mayors can, be proud of that and take that as achievements of the group, as well as what comes out of the negotiations. But this is just, thoughts from the top of my head that I hope we can continue to reflect on.
Great. Thank you, Bruna. And thank you everyone in this first segment for your reflections. We really appreciate it. We will, just on sort of paying attention to the time now, I will move on to our next segment of speakers. I'm so happy to have on board today the friend of LGMA, another friend from last year and continuing on this year, Ambassador Costa from Brazil's Ministry of Cities. We heard this morning from your counterpart, Ulf Jäckel from Germany, speaking again as the CHAMP leadership from Germany, and now we'll hear your perspective from Brazil as one of the new co-chairs of the CHAMP steering group, and your vision for this new evolution of CHAMP in your new kind of role as well. So thank you, Ambassador, and welcome.
Thank you, Ariel. First, let me recognize the number of friends that I see here, and particularly Yunus, which we interacted together with Philip Young last year a lot under the LGMA banner. Bruna Cerqueira was a party conspirator in a lot of things that we did. Let me just tell her that I fully share her provocations. Actually, I think Ariel and Yunus heard similar provocation, obviously put in a less elegant format when we had a conversation about this yesterday. But as you can see, and I hadn't spoken with Bruna about this, it was just out of our out of our own reflection of our evaluation of what we have been. I'm extremely happy to have heard our colleague from Australia mention multi-level climate action because that's what CHAMP is all about. And I'm thrilled to tell you that we have partnered with Germany to move this process forward. I saw that Nathan did not single out CHAMP as one of the initiatives that he thinks is valuable. But as I was hearing his initiatives, and the one particularly one that I am also involved that is on resilient infrastructure, I was pleased to think that CHAMP is instrumental in making sure that those initiatives work out at the national level, because as we all recognize, we need to engage local, regional, and national governments in an agenda that makes sense and works together. And that's what we're trying to achieve. As you know, the Coalition for High Ambition and Multi-Level Partnership was launched in 2023 at COP28. Brazil was one of the initial endorsers. I think we now we add up to 78, 77 endorsing countries plus the EU, which will be coming on board. I think it is a significant number, but what we are trying to ensure, both Germany and Brazil, as we have joint efforts, is actually to make sure that we have really a coalition of the actively willing and engaged in the process. So not just the number, it would be great to be more, but actually we're looking for the quality of the contribution, for the example that we can bring on the table, and to put together an action agenda that actually reinforces, complements, and moves forward the plan to accelerate solution on multi-level governance that we also have on board under the banner of COP30 action agenda. We are working towards then two connected goals, Brazil and Germany. One is obviously strengthening cooperation between national and subnational actors in the design and implementation of key national climate plans. We certainly, as you know, Brazil is extremely engaged in putting together a strategy on that particular idea. Germany similarly. But we are obviously very singular countries in terms of our federal organization. So we are trying to put together a plan that is more general in nature and that puts the conversation forward so that when we arrive at COP31, which is our first step, that we already have a number of results that we can show. It is a long-term engagement. Brazil and Germany, we have committed to co-chair CHAMP at least until COP32. And the second, obviously, connected goal, which I think Bruna actually pointed out and others pointed out, but I think it is important. And I think Bruna actually highlighted that one in her most recent intervention on your question, Ariel, is the issue of improving access to climate finance at the supranational level through enhanced coordination mechanisms, co-design by different levels of government alongside climate finance provider. I think this is extremely significant, and I think it's one that I imagine the LGMA constituency strongly relates to. We are hoping, and we're organizing a structural plan of action to move that forward. in engaging both the global financial architecture level as well as the specific targeted country interventions. We're trying to look at how that works out. Again, using both our experience as national governments as well as the experience of the engaged countries, which brings us to the governance structure. You are fully aware that the idea of CHAMP has always been that it should be driven by member states of the UNFCCC, by parties to the convention. And obviously this is important. It should be led by parties. And so apart from the co-chairs, Brazil and Germany, we are trying to put together a steering group of members between 6 and 12. We are looking at obviously people. It needs to be colleagues that are ready to put some time and effort into this, and therefore this is important. And we also have a new secretariat for CHAMP supporting governance, which is going to be led by WRI. The secretariat will be happy to join any relevant subsequent discussions and collaborate on a day-to-day basis, both with LGMA, which is a necessary counterpart, and part, obviously, the constituency of CHAMP actually coincides a lot with the constituency of LGMA in terms of the friends of this coalition. We are hoping to have an implementation roadmap in short time. And we are hoping to host a number of meetings by Bonn in which we already have all of this put in place. We are also developing consultations with partners, city networks, and subnational representatives to take place in the coming months. And obviously, again, LGMA will be brought on board as one necessary partner with which we want, obviously, to communicate and work together. I think, and I think this is an important point that you will relate to. At the heart of this coalition lies the power of subnational governance. I think it's obvious, and I've said this many times before taking this seat, and now as I'm sitting here as co-chair with Germany, it's even more obvious. It is at the local level, at the subnational level, where climate commitments are translated into everyday reality. Both Bruna and I think a number of previous speakers made this point very strongly. Subnational governments, and I work in a ministry that has this actually in its DNA, which are the engines on innovation and collaboration and uniquely positioned to accelerate progress at scale. And again, I think this has already been said, and I want it to be stressed. And I think that by working in close partnership with local leaders, we know as national governments, and Brazil certainly is one that knows that, and Germany also, that we can unlock, and I heard that Australia also, and I think Turkey also, that we can unlock practical solutions, mobilize investment, and ensure that the NDCs are delivered in ways that are both ambitious and grounded. I think we're going to hear from Bernhard how this is reflected in the NDCs. I think what we want to make sure, and I think the report from UN Habitat would also be very helpful in that, is make sure that as a coalition, we look at the NDCs, we see what's there, and then see how we can test that, how we can actually help those countries that put that on their NDCs, make sure that they achieve what they've put there in the NDCs. So this is what the coalition will work for. At least this is what I see. I'm ready to answer any questions, but first and foremost, I want to ensure to the LGMA constituency, particularly the ones that I see here in the picture, my continued commitment to the cause of local government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador da Costa, and we certainly look forward to working with you more in your capacity as a leader in CHAMP. So thank you, and we'll move on now to Debra. Professor Debra Roberts joining us. Debra is the coordinating lead author for the special report on climate change and cities on Chapter 5 particularly. And we're really glad to have Debra with us to talk about what is perhaps the opportunity of our generation, of everyone's career coming up in just the next year. So Debra, please, the floor is yours.
Super, thanks, Ariel, and colleagues. It's good to be with you, and it certainly isn't an overstatement. This is yet another product this constituency has been working towards for at least 2 decades. So, it's great to see it materializing. I think, and I said this morning, I think the timeline that Yunus put up for us is really an important moment of reflection, because as Nathan said, you can track in that story, this constituency moving from being kind of a supporting cast member to the UNFCCC to one that's now much more coming into the spotlight. And I think that's a critical moment for us to be aware of. And, as Aaron said, in his input in the discussions this morning and in his recorded input, what is really critical is that movement is supported and backed by evidence. And what struck me when Yunus was taking us through the constituency's story in the UNFCCC, it struck me that it very much mirrored our journey in the world of science as well, because as Yunus indicated, in the early days of the UNFCCC, we were largely ignored. The same kind of thing really happened in the realm of science, in the sense that anything was local and urban didn't feature in effectively a global assessment. And it was only because of very bold research colleagues, David Satterthwaite and Karen Sito, when the scoping for the 5th assessment report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was done, they put up their hands very bravely and said, whoa, we think this is something that deserves a new focus. And because of their agency in that process, we saw the first chapters focusing on local and urban issues emerging during the 5th assessment cycle. We were really lucky in the 6th assessment cycle. The stars aligned for this constituency. And as a result of that, South Africa put in a proposal for a special report on cities. And for those who were around for the beginning of that cycle, you remember the very sort of fastidious and energizing lobbying that was done by this constituency around that special report. The net result of that is that the panel accepted the need for a special report in the 7th assessment cycle, and we're currently writing that report, and it will go to government approval in March of next year in Singapore. And as Ariel said, this is the product of a very long period of mobilization about this by this community, because in the early days, everything produced by the scientific community kind of had this constituency as an ancillary. We had to deduce what the global science might mean for us at the local level. For the first time, the science is putting the spotlight on us. It's a global assessment, but focusing very much on the pavements, on that local action. So powerfully, this evidence is coming directly to us. We don't have to filter it. We don't have to interpret it. So, and the IPCC won't be doing another special report on cities in our professional lifetime. So the question is, how do we maximize the benefit of this enormous achievement of this constituency? Well, before the approval, there really are two important moments, I believe, for action. We've got the second review up during May and July, and I would really urge people on this call, government representatives, because it is an expert in government review of the second order draft, to register to review. You can review a paragraph, a page, you can review a chapter, you can review the whole report. But you really will be the agents of change, because we can only change the second order draft on the basis of comments made on it. The governments don't like that second order draft changing unless it's in response to comments. So if anything needs to change, it needs to be now. You are the agents that can make that change possible. So please register, review the second order draft, bring the pavements to the global science. The second major thing is we've got to ensure that we've got a friendly audience when we go to Singapore. So platforms like CHAMP become really important in anticipation of the approval in mobilizing national government support, so that when the negotiators and representatives of the panel arrive, they come with a briefing from their capital. This is something you want to go in and support, and that's really important. So that mobilization is really, really critical. And again, that's something the Australian COP could play a role in as well. So I think there are a number of opportunities prior to March. But as I've said many times to people I speak to about this most special of all the special reports, is our hard work really starts once that report is in fact approved. And so we need to be thinking about how we build bridges between the presidencies. The next presidency for the COP next year is in Africa. 16 years since Africa hosted the negotiations. It's Ethiopia. The Australian and Turkey presidencies need to be building bridges to the Ethiopian presidency, to start that now, to ensure that this special report really lands in a prominent place in the negotiations in Ethiopia is really critical. And Bruna raised what I believe is an understated point of importance about this report. This is the one product of the IPCC in the 7th assessment cycle, which is really well in advance of the global stocktake. So it is going to be heavily relied on. And the question is, how do we mobilize our constituency in ensuring that this special report not only serves us well at the COP in Ethiopia, but also serves us well in terms of the global stocktake assessment. So I'll leave my input there. Thanks, Ariel, very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Debra. Very, very important, critical words for our constituency. So very glad to have you here with us. And then I'll turn now to Bernhard Barth, who is the Program Coordinator for Climate Change and Urban Environment at UN Habitat. And he's going to connect the dots a bit on
Thank you very much. I've just lost my sound from my earphones at that very moment, but you're nodding, Ariel, so I think you can hear me. First of all, thanks, Ariel, for convening us. Thanks, Yunus, for doing so in the previous decade and a half. So I think this constituency has been also very important for UN Habitat, and we're certainly committed to the collaboration moving forward. And I think there are many really fantastic synergies that we have together explored and exploited. Also great to see so many good friends here. Maybe very briefly on our planned engagement at the COP. We have had some early conversations with the COP presidency, including our executive director met on Friday, the COP president. So this is all emerging. We're very much committed to having the 5th ministerial meeting on urbanization and climate change. And as always, also organize this with the LGMA constituency, because it is not just a ministerial meeting that highlights urban issues and multi-level governance, but it also always reflects multi-level partnerships and multi-level climate action by bringing in mayors and sub-national leaders. And of course, for us, this is the pinnacle event of multi-level climate action. We have at the moment the plan to have 3 priority themes for the ministerial meeting. The first one is on NDC implementation. The second one is on financing, and the third one on housing. This can change, therefore I haven't put a slide in there, but of course you have the recording to hold me accountable to this. The NDCs update, Ambassador Costa has mentioned this as a key contribution also to this process. Many of you have seen the report that we launched at COP. We have an updated version with the 128 NDCs that were submitted by the end of the year. We're working towards a much bigger report, not a snapshot report, with deeper analysis and including all of the NDCs cutoff date today. And we're hoping to, or we will be launching this at the World Urban Forum. You can see a whole bookshelf on the right-hand side of the slide with publications that we are planning. The flagship report is the one that we will launch at World Urban Forum, and we will probably do an update later in the year prior to COP. But we also want to provide much deeper analysis, regional analysis, and sub-regional deep dives. We're looking at the development of country dashboards that can really help at the country level to move from the analysis to implementation and action. We're looking at sectoral deep dives at the moment. The ones we are working on is energy and housing. Finance is being discussed. And we are also looking at the development then of updates on the implementation, so those urban NDC implementation reports, which we are also framing as a global urban stocktake, so really something we want to work with the LGMA community on. Next slide. I've spoken already to quite some extent about moving towards implementation. You can see the GCoM countries that UN Habitat is keen to support, and of course in close coordination with the partners in the countries, but then of course also the Brazilian and German co-chairs and the GCoM constituency. But we are also looking at supporting a number of countries that are not yet GCoM partners based on specific requests from our country officers. And so we look forward again to work with you and hopefully bringing them into the GCoM fold as well. So for us, moving forward now quickly in these countries is critical to have some initial cases that we can present at the next COP as part of this mentioned global urban stocktake. And with that, back to you, Ariel. And I put links to WOOF and Innovate for Cities also in the chat.
Wonderful. And we will share these slides afterwards. So thank you, Bernhard. And then I would like to turn to my colleague, Rodrigo Perpetuo, to give us a report to finish things up here on the LGMA National Coordination Group that happened last year in the lead up to COP30. So very exciting to hear about the results of that group. And just to warn everyone, we have about 6 minutes left in the webinar. I will have a few slides at the end on engaging with the LGMA. I won't be able to go through all of them here, but I'll touch on the most critical ones, and then we'll share the slides with you after the webinar. So with that, Rodrigo, I won't take any more of your time. Thank you for joining us today.
No, thank you, Ariel, and of course also recognition to Yunus and his previous role. Very quickly, this was a process that was never put in place before, so a very innovative governance arrangement that is seeking for strength, the convergence that I now see from different voices and from different perspectives. In that sense, we had a full support from the presidency. Bruna is here, and of course, full support from the national government, in this case led by Minister Jader Filho, Minister of Cities, but on his behalf, Ambassador Antonio da Costa was always there with ourselves. And we actually operated also under the example that Brazil has built towards COP30 and of course beyond, putting a political commitment and named climate federalism, bringing the institutional measures to make sure that perspective would be reflected on all the framework that is now in place on the National Climate Action Plan, and of course, also on the programmatic perspective, putting resources and programs that is driving local climate action as well. If you go to the next slide, please, Ariel, you will see that we had then more than 30 organizations, and of course, many of the global ones which have representations on the ground in Brazil, but also some specific ones that are only operating in Brazil altogether, and the 3 levels of government that are there in Brazil, municipal, states, and of course the federal government were together in this national chapter. And if you go to the next one, we held 5 meetings throughout COP30, all in alignment in terms of timing with the global LGMA coordination call, so that we could also reflect what was being guided from the steering committees and from the constituency leadership to our national chapter, and of course bring it back from the national chapter towards the global process as well. And this, if you go to the last slide or the final one, and these, of course, we presented the results at COP30, but these led in the final one, because this is a very short report. If you go to the next one, this it was the preview ones, please, Ariel, sorry. This was actually a very important result of the national LGMA chapter. We could feed up and of course, establish a very concrete dialogue with the key messaging process that was being designed and developed at the global level. I don't think that if we did not have a national chapter, we would have such a shaped messaging towards the presidents and the negotiators, and of course in a very close collaboration with all the governance bodies of the LGMA. So thank you again for all of you that allowed this to happen and that helped make it happen on the ground throughout the process that led us to the successful implementation of COP30.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Very illuminating to hear that report and those reflections on this kind of innovative establishment of COP30. So I think a lot of lessons there that we can all learn together. So thank you for that. And just to finish things up now, I do want to get to the opportunities for the constituency to engage that are upcoming. As I said, I'm going to go through these slides quite quickly because we just have a few minutes left here. So just a bit of a report back in these slides on sort of what we've been doing for these first 3 months. I mean, you were normally hearing from us every month, and so now we kind of need to collect all of these things and report back to you and assure you that we have been doing quite a bit of work to establish these governance frameworks to start to plan for exactly answering the questions that our colleagues here have raised, to do that collective work together. And we also, have been quite paying, even though we do not yet have the working groups, we have been paying attention to the thematic work that is happening within the UNFCCC, following certain processes that are quite relevant to the constituency, and have done quite a number of submissions and are planning to attend events as well. My colleague will share the advocacy calendar for this year, but you can see some of the priority events that are important for the constituency, that will come up throughout the year, and sort of how they relate to the official UNFCCC events. We'll make this available on the website. Kind of mapped onto that are our quarterly briefings, which this is sort of the first one, where we're doing a bit more of the planning and establishing the work for the year. In May, we'll offer another one that's really about preparing for the Bonn climate talks. You've heard how essential the June meetings are going to be in terms of CHAMP, in terms of the IPCC report, in terms of the delivery of some outcomes from COP30, bringing bringing those to those talks. So I think it's going to be a pivotal moment both for the general climate regime, but also for the constituency. And so paying attention to that, we are really trying to motivate towards convening the working groups. So hopefully you've seen the invitation to consult on our terms of reference towards the working groups. That consultation period is open for another week. So please, if you are interested in participating or leading a working group, we really are looking for feedback into that terms of reference. And then we'll be opening up a call for expressions of interest starting around the 9th of April, give or take a few days. But those are two really important moments to engage in what are very important groups to the constituency. And then I think just as an open invitation, we do want to bring a zero draft of our position for this year to the June climate talks. And so I think that will be another place where we're really going to be looking for the constituency to engage on both the direction and the direct content itself once that's drafted. So please stay abreast of those things. And one of the ways you can do that is to subscribe to the monthly bulletin that we have. So here's a QR code for that. My colleague will also put into the chat the link to the LGMA WhatsApp group. That's a good group to stay then connected to if there's on the ground work happening. We'll start new groups for specific events, and you can sort of get connected to the direct coordination channels that way. As I mentioned, we'll have quarterly briefings, again, one before the Bonn climate talks and then two directly before and after COP. And with that, we are over time, and I don't want to keep it's late in the day, I know, for our European folks, and I know other folks towards the West are just starting your days or getting into your days. So I would like to just say a heartfelt thank you to all of you for participating, to our speakers, for joining us in this first briefing, and I think really setting the scene for us for this year of all of the different questions that we need to engage with and answer, and also all of the places where we really need to show up as a constituency. So thank you for painting this picture for us, and we look forward to working with you throughout the year in the lead up to COP31. Thanks and have a great day.